Have you ever noticed the silence after you stop chasing someone who thrives on your attention? It is not the kind of silence that feels peaceful. It is heavy, restless, and almost unbearable for them. Narcissists live off pursuit like air, and when that pursuit ends, something inside them cracks. They panic, not because they suddenly miss you, but because your refusal to play the game exposes the emptiness they've been trying so hard to hide. Think about it. Every time you texted first, every time you forgave too soon, every time you explained yourself when you didn't need to, those moments fed them. They built their power from your reaching. But the moment you stopped, you broke the pattern. And patterns are everything to someone who depends on control. That's why their panic doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like anger. Sometimes it looks like indifference that feels too sharp, as if they are trying to cut you before you can see them bleed. And sometimes it looks like them trying to come back, sweet words on their tongue, promises stitched together with urgency. But underneath it all, it is fear. Fear of losing the one thing they cannot live without. Someone else carrying the weight of their worth. I know how exhausting it is to always be the one chasing, to give pieces of yourself just to keep someone from pulling away, to mistake survival for love. And I know what it feels like to finally stop, to choose your silence, your dignity, your peace. It is both terrifying and liberating. That's what we're diving into here. Why narcissists panic when you stop chasing them. Why the silence you create is more powerful than any confrontation. And why, in that moment, you begin to see yourself differently, not as someone desperate to be chosen, but as someone who finally realizes they have always been enough. Before we go deeper, if this resonates with you, if it feels like I'm speaking directly to your story, stay with me. Take a deep breath and allow these words to land. And if you want more spaces like this, more stories that remind you of your strength in the middle of heartbreak, remember to subscribe and share this with someone who needs it. Not because you have to, but because sometimes a single voice, a single truth, can change the way we see everything. When you stop chasing a narcissist, you hold up a mirror they cannot bear to look into. For the first time, they are confronted with the hollowness beneath the mask they've spent their life polishing. They're not panicking because they love you in the way you've been longing for. They're panicking because your refusal to orbit around them exposes a truth they spend every day running from, that without constant validation, they feel like nothing. At first, you might notice the shift. Maybe they grow louder, angrier, throwing words like knives just to see if they still cut. Or perhaps they retreat into silence, their withdrawal sharp enough to make you doubt yourself. Both are strategies, both are traps designed to pull you back into pursuit. Because the moment you reach again, they can breathe. The panic subsides, not because love has returned, but because the balance of power is restored. But when you resist, when you stand still instead of running after them, that's when their world begins to unravel. They might lash out, painting you as ungrateful, cold, or even cruel. They might suddenly remember how to be tender, offering affection they never gave before, trying to reel you in with sweetness that feels like rain in a desert. This is not transformation. This is desperation. It's hard, I know, because in those moments, you question yourself. You wonder if you're being too harsh, if maybe this time they mean it. But deep down, you know the truth. You've tasted what it feels like to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. And you've seen how quickly their tenderness disappears once you return. The cycle is not love. It is survival, theirs at the cost of yours. And here's where it becomes powerful for you. The silence you hold terrifies them because it is the first time you've chosen yourself over their chaos. That silence is not empty, it is full of the courage it takes to break free from old patterns, full of the quiet reminder that you no longer have to beg for what should have been freely given. Imagine it like this. For years, you were the one carrying the torch in a dark tunnel. Every time you stumbled, you still held it up, guiding both of you forward. But the moment you set that torch down, they are left in the dark they've been avoiding their entire life. And suddenly, they are the one stumbling. That is their panic. That is their fear. And you are learning to see in the dark, to realize you don't need to hold the light for someone else when you've had your own glow all along. There is a moment, almost like the breaking of a spell, when you begin to see it clearly. You remember the countless nights you stayed awake, wondering what you did wrong, replaying every word, every silence, as though love were a puzzle you hadn't solved yet. And then one day, without fanfare, you stop chasing. You stop explaining, stop begging, stop proving your worth to someone who never intended to see it. That moment, though quiet, is the loudest declaration of freedom you will ever make. To the narcissist, this silence is unbearable. They thrive on the chase, not because they want to be caught, but because they need to know they are always being pursued. It reassures them that they are important, that someone is willing to bend, to ache, to bleed just to hold on to them. When you refuse to play that part, it destabilizes the story they've been telling themselves that they are the sun. And you, like everyone else, must orbit around their heat. Their panic reveals itself in strange ways. Some will try to guilt you, reminding you of everything they once did for you, no matter how small. Others will weaponize your empathy, painting themselves as victims, hoping you'll step back into the role of savior. And then there are those who will rage, because anger is easier for them to carry than shame. But no matter which mask they put on, underneath it all is the same trembling truth. Without your chase, they are forced to face their own emptiness, and this is where your healing deepens. Because the silence you've chosen is not only about them, it's about you. It's about giving yourself permission to breathe again without fear of punishment. It's about stepping away from the exhausting dance of push and pull, love and withdrawal, tenderness and cruelty. It's about learning that real love doesn't demand you sacrifice your voice, your boundaries, your soul. Yes, there will be moments of doubt. Moments where the silence feels heavier than the noise ever did. Moments where the temptation to reach out burns through you. Because even pain can feel safer than the unknown. But stay with yourself in those moments. Let the silence teach you. It will show you that you are not fragile, you are strong enough to withstand the ache of letting go. And slowly, as the days pass, that silence becomes less about loss and more about space. Space for your own laughter to return. Space for your body to rest without fear. Space for the version of you that existed before you were taught to beg for love. The panic is theirs. The peace, finally, is yours. What unsettles them most is not your anger, it's your indifference. Anger still ties you to them. Anger still means your energy belongs in their world. But indifference? That's the one thing they cannot hold, cannot twist, cannot use. It is the quiet that tells them you no longer belong to the game. And for a narcissist, that is unbearable. They may try to rewrite the story, convincing others that you were the one who failed, that you were unstable, ungrateful, impossible to love. They do this not only to protect their image, but to soothe the panic inside that whispers, "What if I wasn't enough?" They cannot face that whisper, so they cast it onto you instead. And yet, the moment you stop chasing, their performance loses its audience. Because deep down, you are no longer listening. This is why silence is not weakness, it is your greatest strength. It disarms them. They do not know how to fight against nothing. They do not know how to control someone who no longer hands over their power. And while they panic, you begin to remember who you are without their shadow over you. Think of the times you silenced yourself just to avoid conflict. The times you gave too much, hoping it would make them stay. The times you told yourself, if I can just be patient, if I can just love harder, maybe it will finally be enough. That exhaustion carved deep wounds in you, didn't it? But your silence now is different. It is no longer about fear. It is about reclaiming every part of you that was once given away. They will feel it, the shift. At first, they may test you small messages, sudden kindness, a memory pulled from the past like bait. They are not reaching because they've changed. They are reaching because they sense the loss of control, the fading of their grip. And if you answer, the cycle begins again. But if you remain steady, if you keep your silence, something extraordinary happens. Their panic deepens and your freedom expands. Because here's the truth, they never wanted you to see you were the one holding everything together. Without your effort, your forgiveness, your pursuit, the relationship collapses. Not because you were unworthy, but because it was built on you carrying all the weight. When you stop, you no longer carry their illusions. You carry yourself. And that shift, though it may feel quiet now, will echo for the rest of your life. There comes a moment when the panic they feel starts to reveal itself in ways you couldn't have predicted. Perhaps it's the late-night message that suddenly appears on your phone, filled with urgency and sweetness that was never there before. Perhaps it's a phone call where their voice trembles just slightly, as if they are afraid of the silence stretching between you. Or maybe it's the opposite, an icy cold withdrawal, a performance of not caring at all, as though you never mattered. Both are masks. Both are defenses. Both are symptoms of the same thing, the loss of control they once had over your heart. And here you are, standing in the middle of that storm, realizing that for once, you are not the one trembling. Yes, you may feel the ache, the pull, the temptation to answer. You may even feel guilt, as though by protecting your peace, you are somehow being cruel. But breathe with me for a moment. Feel the stillness of this silence. Notice how your body no longer bends to their chaos. That's not cruelty, that's survival turning into self-respect. When you stop chasing, you force them into a confrontation they've avoided their entire lives. Without you carrying the weight, they are left with their own emptiness. And emptiness is the one thing they cannot bear. They will do anything to escape it, rage, plead, manipulate, charm. But no matter how loudly they scream or how softly they whisper, the truth remains. Their panic is not about losing you. It's about losing the reflection of themselves they saw in your devotion. You were their mirror, the one who reflected back importance, power, and significance. Without your gaze, they are left staring into a void. That void terrifies them, and yet, that same void is where your freedom begins. Because your silence isn't just absence, it's presence. It's you finally taking up space in your own life. It's you refusing to live as someone's mirror and learning instead to shine as your own light. So let them panic. Let them rage. Let them paint you as the villain if they must. You know the truth now. You've stepped out of the endless cycle of chase and retreat. And while they scramble in the ruins of control, you are building something new, a life not based on who notices you, but on the quiet, steady power of finally noticing yourself. There is something haunting about the way they look at you when they realize you are no longer reachable. It is not love, not tenderness. It is fear disguised as desperation. They might suddenly remember the little details they never cared about before, bringing them up as if to prove they always paid attention. They might cry, something you thought they were incapable of, and those tears can pierce straight into the softest part of you. But listen closely. These are not the tears of someone who has discovered love. They are the tears of someone terrified of losing their supply. This is why your silence feels like fire to them. It burns away the illusions they've worked so hard to keep alive. And when illusions burn, all that is left is the emptiness they cannot stand. They panic not because you are gone, but because they are left with themselves, and that is the one person they cannot face. And you? You are beginning to feel the strange kind of peace that comes with choosing yourself. At first, it feels shaky, uncertain, like walking barefoot on unfamiliar ground. But the longer you stand, the stronger you feel. You notice the weight lifting, the way your body exhales in relief. You begin to see how many times you silenced your needs just to keep someone else comfortable. How many times you gave away your voice just to be heard. And now in this silence, you are hearing yourself for the first time in years. The narcissist will try to drag you back into the dance because they cannot bear the empty space you've created. They will promise change, promise growth, promise a future that finally matches the one you dreamed of in the beginning. And oh, how tempting it can be to believe them, to reach for the version of them you always hoped was real. But remember, the beginning was not love. It was bait. They offered you a dream so they could keep you chasing it. What frightens them most is that you finally see this truth, that you have stepped out of the fog and into clarity. And in that clarity, you are untouchable. Because no matter what mask they put on, lover, victim, savior, accuser, you now know what lies beneath it. This is the power of not chasing. This is the power of silence. It does not just starve their control, it feeds your freedom. And slowly, as their panic grows louder, your peace grows deeper. Their panic, though, has a rhythm. At first it is sharp, chaotic, almost violent in the way it pushes against your silence. But when that doesn't work, it softens. They remember the early days, the words they once used to sweep you off your feet. They know how much you longed for tenderness, how deeply you craved to be seen. So they bring it back, dripping with sincerity, promising to finally be what you always believed they could be. And if you're not careful, this is the moment that cuts the deepest. Because it feels real. It feels like maybe the suffering had a purpose. Maybe all the giving finally cracked them open. But you know better now. You've seen the pattern. You felt the sweetness evaporate the second they sensed your devotion had returned. That's not love, it's panic dressed as love. Here's the truth. Narcissists panic when you stop chasing them because your absence exposes their dependence. They want to believe they are untouchable, self-sufficient, powerful. But you leaving reveals what they've hidden from themselves, that they cannot hold on to connection without manipulation, without control, without draining the life out of someone else. And facing that truth is unbearable. Meanwhile, your silence is transforming you. You begin to notice that your shoulders don't ache the same way anymore, that your laughter feels less forced, that your thoughts no longer circle endlessly around someone else's moods. You remember small pleasures you once abandoned, the book you never finished, the hobby you left behind, the music you used to love. Slowly, life begins to expand again. The narcissist may call this selfishness. They may accuse you of abandoning them, of being cold, of being everything they themselves were to you. But do not mistake projection for truth. What they call selfishness is simply you reclaiming yourself. What they call abandonment is you refusing to abandon your own heart any longer. And here is where their panic and your healing part ways. They will scramble searching for another source to fill the void you left behind. That's the cycle they are bound to until they choose to face their own emptiness, which most never will. But you are learning to live without begging, without bending, without chasing. You are learning the quiet miracle of being enough on your own. The panic is theirs. The freedom, at last, is yours. There's a turning point in your silence. A moment when what once felt like loss begins to feel like liberation. At first, it was raw, your body reaching for the familiar ache of chasing, your mind rehearsing the same old lines of blame and longing. But as days stretch into weeks, something shifts. The silence that once weighed heavy starts to feel like space. And in that space, you begin to notice yourself again. The narcissist, meanwhile, feels the opposite. Their panic deepens. They may try one last dramatic gesture, something bold enough to shake you, to lure you back into the orbit they so desperately miss. Maybe they show up unannounced. Maybe they flood you with messages. Maybe they use others to carry their words to you. It looks passionate, but it's not passion. It's fear. Fear of losing the one who kept their emptiness at bay. And isn't it striking? The same person who once acted as if your love was a burden now cannot bear the loss of it. The same one who made you feel replaceable now scrambles to remind you that you're essential. But notice this isn't because they suddenly value you. It's because they cannot stand the reflection they see without you. You were the screen onto which they projected importance. Without it, they are left with a blank wall, and the silence echoes louder than anything you could say. What happens next is the part they never prepared for. You don't come running. You don't bend. You don't explain. You don't return to the chase. And in that refusal, you reclaim yourself in ways words cannot describe. Your stillness becomes a quiet revolution. You may still feel the pull at times, the temptation to answer, to soothe, to save. But every time you hold back, every time you choose not to step into the cycle, your strength grows. And the beauty is this: it's not just about surviving them anymore. It's about building a life where you no longer measure your worth by how much someone else needs you. Their panic will pass. They will find someone else to mirror back what they cannot give themselves. But you will rise. Slowly, tenderly, with shaky hands and steady courage, you will rise. And as you do, you'll see that the silence you once feared was never empty. It was the sound of your soul coming home. And maybe the hardest truth to swallow is this: they never truly feared losing you. They feared losing the control they had over you. They feared the end of the endless chase, the certainty that no matter how far they pulled away, you would always come running back. That safety net is gone now, and for the first time, they are the ones left reaching into the void. But here's what's even more powerful: you don't reach back. You feel the tremor in your chest, yes. You hear the whispers in your mind that say, what if they've changed? What if this time is different? And yet, you stay rooted in silence, because deep down, you finally know. Real change doesn't arrive wrapped in panic. Real love doesn't need to be chased. Their panic is proof of what you always suspected, but never wanted to admit: that the love you gave was never truly matched. That you were pouring oceans into someone who could only sip when it served them. And while that realization stings, it also sets you free. Because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And in your freedom, something beautiful happens. You begin to dream again. Not of them, not of fixing, not of saving, not of being chosen, but of yourself. You start imagining mornings where your first thought is not their mood. Afternoons where your energy is spent on joy rather than survival. Nights where your bed feels like rest, not waiting. Yes, they will panic. They will rage. They will cry. They will perform. But none of it changes the truth that your silence has spoken. You are no longer theirs to control. And while they scramble in fear, you are steadying yourself in love, the kind that begins and ends within you. So let them panic. Let them feel the emptiness they've run from their whole lives. It is not your burden to carry anymore. You have carried enough. You have given enough. And now, for the first time, you are giving to yourself. This is the end of the chase. This is the beginning of your becoming. There's a strange kind of poetry in the way their panic collides with your peace. For so long, it was the opposite. You panicked when they withdrew, and they basked in the comfort of your pursuit. Now the roles are reversed, and the shift unsettles them in ways you may never fully see. They are not used to being the one left behind. They are not used to silence that does not break. They try to fill the space with noise. Accusations, confessions, promises, distractions, anything to keep you from holding the silence steady. But the more they scramble, the clearer it becomes. This was never love. It was need. A need so deep it devoured everything around it, including you. And yet, within that clarity, you feel grief. Because as much as you know the truth, part of you still remembers the dream you once held, the version of them you fell for before the mask slipped. It's natural to miss that dream. It's natural to ache for what you thought it could be. But with every breath you take in the quiet, you begin to accept that you were never mourning the person, they were never truly there. You were mourning the story, the hope, the promise. And stories, no matter how beautiful, are not enough to sustain a heart. Their panic will intensify the more you reclaim yourself. It may even become cruel, punishing, desperate in ways that sting like old wounds reopening. But here is where your strength reveals itself. You no longer confuse their chaos for love. You no longer confuse their control for safety. You see it for what it is, and in that truth, you rise. Slowly, the silence becomes more than just distance from them. It becomes a sanctuary. A place where you learn to hear your own voice again. A place where your worth is not conditional, not dependent, not up for negotiation. And as that sanctuary expands, their panic loses its grip, because no matter how hard they try, they cannot unteach you what you now know. You are not meant to chase. You are meant to be met, cherished, seen. And so, while they spin in circles of fear and control, you take your first steady steps into a life that is finally, truly yours. There will come a night when you realize you haven't thought about them all day. Not once. The silence that once throbbed like an open wound has softened into something steady, almost sacred. It doesn't ache anymore, it breathes. And in that moment, you understand just how far you've come. The narcissist, however, is still caught in their storm. Their panic is not a passing wave, it's a hunger that never ends. They will search for someone else to feed it, someone else to chase, someone else to mirror back the greatness they cannot find within themselves. And though they may succeed in finding another orbit, it will always end the same way. Because no amount of chasing can ever fill the void of a soul that refuses to face itself. You see that now. You see that their panic was never about love lost, but about power slipping through their hands. And you see that your silence was never about cruelty, but about survival. The roles have been rewritten. No longer are you the one waiting for scraps of affection. No longer are you the one shrinking to fit inside the frame of their approval. You stand taller now, even in your quiet, especially in your quiet. And isn't it strange? The very thing you feared losing them has become the very thing that saved you. The panic you once felt is no longer yours to carry. It belongs to them, and them alone. You don't need to rescue them from it. You don't need to soften it with your return. You don't need to sacrifice yourself just to quiet their fear. You are free. Free to rebuild. Free to rediscover. Free to choose love that doesn't come wrapped in pain. And as your silence grows roots, something new blossoms inside you. The knowing that you are enough, exactly as you are. Their panic will always belong to them. Your peace, finally, belongs to you. And maybe that's the most unexpected part of this journey, the way peace sneaks up on you. Not all at once, not in some grand revelation, but in small, almost unnoticeable ways. A laugh that feels genuine again. A morning where your chest doesn't feel heavy. A day when you choose for yourself without worrying how someone else will react. These are the signs that your silence is no longer just a shield, but a soil where new life is growing. The narcissist, of course, cannot comprehend this. To them, silence is punishment. It is rejection. It is abandonment. They do not see it as healing. They see it as threat. And so their panic lingers, circling back in waves, trying to pierce through the quiet you've built. But here's the beauty. What once would have hooked you now falls flat. Their anger doesn't ignite you. Their pleas don't weaken you. Their indifference doesn't crush you. Because you've discovered something they never expected. You no longer need them to define who you are. They panic because they realize they've lost the power to make you small. They panic because your silence says louder than words ever could, I choose me now. And in their world, where everything depends on control, nothing is more terrifying than someone who no longer plays along. You, on the other hand, are beginning to see possibility again. The silence is teaching you that love is not supposed to feel like hunger, that attention is not the same as affection, that presence is not the same as peace. It is teaching you that you don't need to chase what was never running toward you in the first place. One day, their name will pass through your mind, and it will no longer sting. It will simply be a story that ended, a chapter that closed, and instead of panic, you will feel gratitude for the lesson, for the strength you didn't know you had, for the freedom that came when you finally stopped running after someone who was only ever running away.